Walter Goss died in Wethering, Vermont, on February 11, 2019. I know this because he died 11 days before Beverly did. And when I was going through her papers in March of that year, I found his obituary, cut from what appeared to be a Vermont newspaper, folded in half, and kept inside a copy of a novel that had lived on her nightstand for as long as I could remember. I did not know who Walter Goss was when I found the obituary. I found out over the following 6 weeks, going through 46 years of paper. I am 87 years old. I want to tell you what I found, and more than that, I want to tell you what I had not looked at for 46 years. Because the second part is the part that kept me awake at night for 2 years after Beverly died. And the first part is just facts. The paint spatter scar on my right hand from 1978. I'm running my thumb across it right now. White against the skin. I do that without thinking. Beverly knew about that scar. She was in the kitchen when it happened. She drove me to the emergency room. She knew everything about me. I thought I knew everything about her. I'll come back to what was in the papers. But first, you need to understand what I was doing in 1973. Because that's when it started. And 1973 is where the story of what I did not look at begins. Beverly and I married in August of 1961. I was 26, she was 25. We met at a church social in Wethersfield. She was there with her sister. I was there because my mother made me go, which is probably the only useful thing my mother's nagging ever produced. She was from a different kind of family than mine. Her father had been a high school principal. She had 2 years of college before the money ran out. She read books the way other people watch television, constantly, without stopping, without needing to explain why. I read the sports page and the job estimate forms. I knew this about us from the start. We both knew it. We had a working marriage built around what we had in common: the house, the boys, the practical management of a life, and around a mutual and never-stated understanding that we were different kinds of people, and that this was not a problem so long as it was not examined too closely. I want to be honest about that arrangement because I've had 5 years now to think about it, and I believe it was real. Not a failure, an agreement, functional for a long time. The agreement started to show strain in 1973. Gary was 12, Dennis was 9, Paul was 6. I was working 6 days a week. Beverly was at home. The boys were in school during the day, and she had, for the first time in 12 years of marriage, approximately 5 empty hours every weekday, in which she was a 37-year-old woman with 2 years of college and a significant number of books, and no one to discuss them with. I did not see this as a problem at the time. That is the first thing I did not look at. In my 30s, 1962 through 1971, I was building. The business, the house, the family, all of it going up at once, the way a job goes when you're in the productive middle of it. Everything requiring attention, everything progressing, no time to step back and look at the whole wall. I was good at the work, steady hands, good eye for preparation, which is where most painters cut corners and where most problems start. What's underneath the surface? What needs fixing before you put anything over it? I had regular customers by 1966, a waiting list by 1969. Beverly ran the house. She ran it well. I trusted her with everything domestic the way you trust a good subcontractor, completely, without needing to understand the details. That was a reasonable division of labor. It was also a way of not having to know her as closely as I might have. The boys got older. The house got quieter. By 1973, Beverly had begun attending a book group that met on Thursday evenings at the Hartford Public Library. She mentioned it once. I said that sounded good. I didn't ask who ran it, who was in it, what they read. The book group met on Thursdays for approximately 3 years. Walter Goss facilitated the book group. I'll tell you what I know about Walter Goss from the papers, which is more than I wanted to know, and less than I probably need to. He was an English teacher at a high school in Hartford from 1968 to 1981, then moved to Vermont in 1981, where he taught at a small college until he retired in 2004. He was married. His wife was named Patricia. He had 2 daughters. His obituary said he was a devoted husband and father and an avid fly fisherman. He and Beverly wrote letters for 46 years. Not every week. Some years, from what I could reconstruct, more than others. The letters from the 1970s were frequent. The 1980s less so, after his move to Vermont. The 1990s were steady. After I retired in 2000 and was home more, they dropped to perhaps 6 or 8 letters a year. I found 283 letters in total, in 3 shoeboxes at the back of the closet in the spare room, under a box of the boys' old school projects that neither of us had opened since approximately 1991. She had kept every letter he ever wrote her for 46 years, in a house I painted every room of myself. Now I want to tell you what I found when I looked backward, because this is the part that took the 2 years, and is the part that is actually useful. The honest accounting, which I did not start until about 8 months after finding the letters, because the first 8 months I was primarily angry, which is understandable, and also not useful. The honest accounting of what I had access to, and chose not to examine. In my 40s, 1973 to 1982, I noticed 7 things I did not ask about. The first was the book group itself. I never asked who was in it. I never went to pick her up. She drove herself there and drove herself home, and I was watching the game or already asleep, and I registered it as Beverly's Thursday thing and left it alone. The second was a change in her around 1975. Not dramatic. She was more herself, more willing to talk at dinner, more likely to have opinions about things she read. I attributed this to the boys getting older and her having more time. That was probably partially correct. It was not the whole of it. The third was a letter I saw on the kitchen table in 1977, handwritten, Vermont return address. She put it in her pocket when I walked in. I noticed. I did not ask. There were 4 more in that decade. I won't itemize them all. The pattern is the point. The paint spatter scar. I'm pressing my thumb against it harder than usual. In my 50s, 1982 to 1992, the book group had ended. Walter had moved to Vermont, and what I had access to was a wife who occasionally received letters from a Vermont address, and who was, in a way I could not have named at the time, slightly less present in the house than she had been. Not absent. Present differently. A percentage of her attention somewhere else, at low but consistent levels, the way a small draft comes in under a door you haven't fully examined. I did not examine the door. I painted other people's houses for 38 years, and I knew every wall in my own house, and I did not look at what was underneath the surface of my own marriage, because the surface was smooth, and the job appeared to be holding. That is the honest accounting. Not Beverly's choices. Those are hers, and she isn't here to speak to them, and I have no interest in speaking for her. My choices. What I saw. What I didn't ask about. In my 60s, I retired and was home all day, and Beverly was home all day, and we had, for the first time in 38 years of marriage, the same hours in the same house, with no boys and no job to organize the structure of a day around. It was not a bad time. I want to say that plainly. We were not unhappy. We had routines that worked. I fixed things around the house. She read. We ate dinner together every night. We watched the news. We went to Gary's on Sundays when he was home. But there was something in those years, 2000 to 2019, that I understand now as the specific texture of a marriage where one person is fully present and the other is partially located somewhere else. Not always. Not dramatically. Percentages. I had built a good enough life around the surface of a marriage that had more underneath it than I had looked at. The surface was smooth. I was good at smooth surfaces. It's what I did for 38 years. The problem with being good at surfaces is that you stop asking what's underneath them. I found the last letter Walter Goss wrote Beverly in October 2018, 4 months before he died. It was not a dramatic letter. It was the letter of two people in their early 80s who had been in each other's lives in some form for 46 years and knew that time was shortening. He wrote about fly fishing. He wrote that he was glad she was still well. He wrote that he thought about her when he read certain books and that he expected he always would. He did not write that he loved her. He did not need to. I read that letter 7 times in the first week after I found it. I have read it perhaps 30 times total over the 5 years since. I'm still not entirely sure what I'm reading for, which is the most honest thing I can tell you about where I am now. Beverly died 11 days after he did. I don't know whether she knew he had gone first. There was no letter in the house that told her. There may have been a phone call. I have no way of knowing. That question occupied me for a year. I eventually stopped asking it because the answer would not change anything that had already happened. Some of you are living inside a surface that you have decided not to examine. Not necessarily this. Not necessarily a secret of this kind or this scale. But something. A door that has a draft coming under it that you have noticed and not opened. A letter on a kitchen table you chose not to ask about. A change in someone you attributed to something plausible, because the plausible explanation required less of you than the accurate one. I am not saying look. I am not saying don't look. I don't know what the right answer is, and I am 87 years old, and I have been living with that uncertainty for 5 years, and I am not closer to resolving it. What I know is that I had 11 moments across 46 years where looking was available to me, and I chose each time the surface. Some of those choices were made because I was tired, or busy, or because the surface was smooth enough that disturbing it felt like unnecessary work. And some of them, more than I am comfortable admitting, were made because I knew, at some level I did not examine, that looking would require something of me that I wasn't prepared to give. A harder conversation, a less comfortable arrangement, a marriage that required more than I had been putting into it. The draft under the door was not only coming from Beverly's side. The scar on the back of my hand, the sprayer that misfired in 1978 in a kitchen in East Hartford. I was not paying attention to the pressure when I pulled the trigger. Beverly drove me to the emergency room. She always knew more about what I wasn't paying attention to than I did. I'm just not sure anymore that ignorance and inattention are the same thing.